If you are an individual who is having a spiritual awakening and you have been a part of a system of indoctrination, whether it be Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, academia, or another type of programming, you may want to watch this conversation. Greetings, everyone. This is Christina, the Black Swan Sibyl, greeting you in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Today I spoke with Melissa Michaelson, who is a former Jehovah's Witness and a life coach with Rose Gold Healing.
Hi there.
Hi.
It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. How about you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So what do you do now? Like, you're in the Netherlands. You know, I've heard some of your story. I did watch the video you sent me upon your story of leaving the organization. Yeah.
I didn't watch it before I sent it to you. I might have been really angry in that video. I'm not that angry anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do as far as like for spirituality or for work or?
Yeah, all of that. And like you have a whole new life in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I do. I have completely started over. It's like dumping out the old and putting all new inside.
Good for you.
Yeah, thanks. Not everybody has to do it so drastically, but in my case, it was necessary.
Yeah. And so you have a son.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so you have a new family as well.
I do. Yeah. Yep. Round 2.
Very nice. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Very nice.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting us record this conversation because I feel like, you know, some of it may benefit other witnesses who are awakening.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it feels good to just, you know, I haven't really talked that much openly about a lot of this. Even though for us, so my husband and I both stepped away. And so we've been on this journey together, which is a blessing, really. And yet it's been a prolonged process because I feel like my nature is very gentle anyway, like, and to have done it any other way, excuse me, I still have a bit of a cough, would have been too like violent for it. It's like I needed to stay intact. So it was interesting. The process that we went through was quite different, or, you know, we kind of slowly stepped away and remained intact. In other words, we don't have a title of like disfellowshipped or disassociated or anything like that. And that process has been like a 15-year process. It's been interesting. There's benefits to that. And then there's some hard things about that too. And one of the reasons that we took I don't know if I can say that this was intentional or if it was just like how it worked out. You know, that's kind of the other piece of that. But my husband's family lives close by, and they've been, you know, an important part of our lives for a long time. And they're very, very, not all. His father and stepmother are very active in. And so we wanted to, you know, kind of like not be too harsh about our parting, right? And it actually worked out in everyone's favor that way. So my story is going to be different than others, right? And how that all kind of worked out.
Well, I think at this point, if you're a witness and you're thinking that this may not be the truth you thought it was, but you're invested as far as like your friends and your family go, the wisest thing to do is walk away
Yeah.
slowly, gently,
Yeah.
like stop going to meetings and,
Yep.
whatever, because if you do get disfellowship, then you have cut off
I know.
everything. I didn't get disfellowship this time. I was disfellowship before, but this time I walked away. I kind of had a breakdown. And so I was really angry, and people were paying attention, and they were like, I got the elders called, but I knew not to say anything that would make them disfellowship me. So I walked away too, a little more chaotic than what you did, not gentle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then later I felt that it was necessary for me to write a letter, which I chose to do.
Yeah, that's like that's more for you, right?
Yeah.
Than it, yeah. I can feel that. I can feel that there would be benefits to that.
Yeah, so I did disassociate myself a couple years after I walked away. But if I were to do it again with the certainty that I have now of what would happen after I left, I would just quietly not say anything and allow my relationships to stay intact.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine that has grown up Mormon reached out to me yesterday, and this is the timing of it is very interesting, because I feel like one of the things that I am equipped for and being equipped for is to help people through these types of transitions, like big ones, like life-changing transitions. And she reached out and she asked me, she said, and I knew that over the last couple of years, she'd been thinking about and talking out loud about, questioning her faith and religion and her involvement. And I know there's been like these slow incremental steps toward making changes. And she reached out yesterday and she said, did you experience a deep mourning period and like so much grief and so many tears, like you don't want to get out of bed kind of thing when you stepped away? And I'm like, yes. And I still have periods of grief because, when I think about my involvement and it was heartfelt involvement. When I involved myself with my heart. I knew what I was doing. I really, really did. And at the time that I was active, I needed it. I needed this structure. I needed this thing that had very, very, very clear expectations, very clear rules, because my life at home was chaotic. And I was 14 when I got baptized and I knew what I was doing. I'm like, no, I'm doing this and I know what I'm doing. I'm making this decision and I'm going to do it. And I gathered so many beautiful people and friends along the way. I kept my teenage years intact. Like I remained like wholesome. And that was like important to me because of my gentle nature. Like if I would have things that I would look back on and regret about being careless and reckless and whatever in my past, that would be much more detrimental to me than it would have been to just stay on this wholesome path, So it actually, like, I have said this out loud to people before. And like, as far as the whole witness lifestyle was concerned, I rocked it. I rocked it. And I followed all the rules and I did everything right. And my heart was in it. That's the thing. And so that's a lot to mourn, there's a lot to let go of. It's a lot to grieve. And when I'll kind of just continue with that story, if that's okay, just Absolutely. To kind of, okay. So throughout high school, I stayed active. And then when I graduated from high school, I went right into the full-time pioneer work. And at that time it was 90 hours a month. And I had a lot of friends that, a few friends, and we just had just this nice friend group that we did this with, and I was enjoying myself. To be honest, I hated the door-to-door ministry, hated it, but I forced myself to do it because it was the right thing to do. I did not, it's so uncomfortable. It's so cringy. It's just, there's nothing normal about walking up to somebody's door, knocking on it, and asking them to talk about religion and God. And
it's more than that. It's asking them to change their way of being.
And it's me saying to them, you aren't quite right. I'm here to show you how to be right with God, right? Yeah, exactly. But at the time, again, my heart was in it, right? I mean, I was truly dedicated and in it. So then I never went to college after high school or anything like that. I stayed pioneering for many, many years. I always had roommates. We always shared expenses. I'll always live paycheck to paycheck, right? And then I was married at 23. And my husband, before we were married, he was active in the international construction work. Mm-hmm. And had been for several years. And that was always actually my dream. I always wanted to do that. And that wasn't why I married him. I mean, I loved him and I still do. We're still married. And so I joined him and we lived in Mozambique, Africa for 3 years. And right after getting married. And of course, that's a huge transition into marriage and then into living in a completely different part of the world. And, again, I mean, that we had quite a few challenges that came up, and but I feel like it really, really solidified our relationship because we went through some really tough times together. And so we then, while we were there, we got pregnant. And so, you know what that means, it was at least a, what do I call it? An honorable discharge. So we had left in early 2000 and we came back. So I live right now in Upper Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan. This is where my husband is from and where his family resided. And we decided after a little bit of time to come here because of the closeness of his family and start our family here. So we've been here ever since, actually. So it's 21 years now. But even when we were married, my husband was already thinking about leaving because he was an elder. He had a vast experience seeing things behind the scenes, seeing the way things operated, and internationally seeing how things got funded, how materials got funneled, how, there's a lot there that remains hidden. And he got to see some of these things and he understood that he was actually playing a pretty big and a little bit dark game. And he started to really, knowing that he needed to start paving his way out, but wasn't sure what that was even going to look like. And so when we got pregnant, he was just so relieved. It was just like, okay, this is step one, right? And so coming back to his kind of home congregation was tricky for him because there was some ghosts in the closet there. They're here. And then after I would say 3 years of being back exhausted because the expectations of, I think you spoke about this too, the expectations of like needing to have this many hours of field service, all this stuff, and be an elder and work full time and raise these babies and all of this. It was exhausting. And then something came up with my husband where he ended up getting essentially blackballed. It was this whole big thing that came up in, and it was just, without going into detail of the story, he was blackballed. But he also could see it as like, all right, this is it. This is the time I get to decide. If I continue with this, I'm only going to suffer more. If I decide to make a change right now, this is my clean break, right? This was like, it was truly this moment of decision. And of course, where I was at the time, my husband was in a completely different frame of mind, whereas I knew I was exhausted. I knew I was like, I don't know how to keep this up anymore. I feel guilty about having children, for crying out loud, because I was born or active in the 80s when we were pretty much told, don't have babies because this world is too rotten and the end is coming. And then spend all of your time pioneering instead, right? And so I had this like guilt about having babies, and I was like noticing these things. And then when I tried to read the Bible story book to my kids, I'm like, I was mortified. I was mortified with the stories like I had never been mortified ever. And I'm like, I cannot teach my children these things. So this kind of stuff started trickling in for me. And then at the same time that like took place with my husband, like all kinds of things just kind of imploded. So like, my sister-in-law was killed in a car accident very suddenly. And my brother, had at the time a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-month-old daughter, and they were both in the car with their mother. And so she didn't make it. And so we went down for the funeral. So I got to do a little bit of a backstory here, but my brother and my sister were baptized and then not disfellowshipped, but disassociated. My brother joined the National Guard after high school. So that kind of, it eliminated, his actions said that he's no longer a witness. So it was just kind of one of those things. And then my sister disassociated with when she was like 16 because my mom told her she should, because it would just be easier. It's just like, it was a really, really crazy, chaotic time period. But I had not been with my brother or my sister for like years. And, I practiced the good witness thing by avoiding them, by not having anything to do with them. They weren't invited to our wedding, all of that stuff that now I see. And I just, finally, we've made amends, I've made amends with my siblings, but that was like really something. So when he lost his wife, went down for the funeral, like showing up like, well, here we are in your life at this tragic moment. And it was really nice to be together during that time. But when it was time to go home, I asked myself, I'm like, now what? Do I go back to avoiding him again, shunning him? Mm-hmm. Like, do I wait for another tragedy, another horrible thing to happen, and then say, oh, here I am? I'm just like, this makes no sense to me. And I made a decision at that moment that I will never do that again. I just won't. He will always be part of my life. My sister will always be. I knew that it would take time to build trust, because why would they trust me when I've just only been one way toward them for so many years? So throughout time, again, that feeling that is my nature. Don't get me wrong. I can go in with a sword. I have that side to me too. But I feel like my truer nature is much more gentle. But we've come to develop a relationship brand new again, with those two siblings. So at that time period, there's just all this stuff coming in to like jar me out of this one way of seeing things for so long, and to really come through and look at things. So that was really what started my whole exploration. Then I remember coming to the realization that I needed Jehovah in my life as a child and as this young adult, because I felt I had this perception and this feeling, but I felt it, that he protected me. Like he was there. He was like the safe place for me. And as long as I did everything right, I would be safe. So that was like this, yes, it was always around safety, right? So now here I am. I'm like 30 now, at that time, 30, maybe a couple years, like early 30s. And I'm like, okay, I don't need that anymore. I don't need that safety. I'm okay now. So who is God to me now? Like, who is Jehovah to me? What do I need? What do I want? Right. And that was another big question that I asked myself. And then I realized I had to mature my thinking around my spirituality. I had to mature my sovereignty, essentially, right? Come into myself as a mature human being. And then what does that look like spiritually? So, even though these things were all happening kind of in the quiet sidelines in my own being, all of this stuff on the outside was happening with my husband. It all came to a head. He stepped down from being an elder, and he said, he essentially said, I won't step foot in there again. That was very jarring to me, because it was like, I had all these questions I was already running through, but to have it come that clearly and strongly was a little jarring. I wasn't ready to let it go quite yet. And so I continued going to the Kingdom Hall, even if Tim didn't. And, but every time I went, I saw something new. I felt something new. I realized something new, and I knew that it was time. And so it was kind of convenient, because my husband's grandmother was elderly, and she was in the neighboring congregation, and she was listening to meetings from home over the phone. And so we would give Tim's dad and stepmom a break from sitting with her so that they could go to the congregation in person. So we would go sit with grandma, and we would listen. We would listen on over the phone with her and just sit in her living room. And it was while we were doing that, so people from our congregation assumed that's where we were. And if we weren't, people over there assumed we were at this other Kingdom Hall. And it just kind of worked out just so nicely to just kind of disappear to a couple of assemblies, because my half sister got baptized or whatever. And then I think we went through to a couple of memorials. And then and I think the last time we went was a memorial, and I'm like, yeah, we're done now. It was like, I just needed to reaffirm that this is the right thing for me to be doing. Right. So, so that's how it went for us. And we never did, write a letter. We didn't, I still have family that are like, as soon as you get over whatever grudge you're holding, you'll be back or whatever. And, and it's like, no, actually, that's not how it is. So we've had more intimate conversations, but haven't like made this announcement to the Kingdom Hall or to the organization that we have stepped away. My husband did say, take our records out of the file and just rip them up. We're just no longer part of your filing system. Our names no longer belong on those records. So So it's just been a journey since then, right? Too, a journey of letting go, a journey of grieving, a journey of finding a new community, a journey of stepping into this world that's always been worldly and dangerous and trying to find your way through. I did go, I in 2012 to 2016, I got my college education. I got a bachelor's degree because I felt like I have to do this. I have to see that I'm not going to fall apart and that I'm not going to go, the assumption built in is that once you step away and you don't have that structure, then you just fall apart and you get into drugs and alcohol and other addictions, or you go off the deep end, right? There's just this built-in assumption. It's like, well, what if at my core, I'm I'm full of integrity because it's who I am. Yeah. It's not because some rule told me I have to be, but that's built into me, right? Is that possible? Yes, it is. It is. We have that capability of, as humans, to just be integrally having the highest good of people in mind, rather than inherently wicked. I mean, I feel like that's just completely flipped around.
My partner and I, we talk a lot about spiritual things. And one of the things that we've been talking about lately is black and white thinking. Mm-hmm. And, I think that when you're a witness, everything is black and white. There's Absolutely. Either Jehovah or Satan's world. And you can't, the fence belongs to Satan. There is no in between. But, I think that people need to know that there's a whole lot more. The gray area is where reality is, actually.
Absolutely. I know. I remember it kind of coming to this illustration with my kids one time, going into when they used to have Blockbuster stores where you go in and rent movies. 85% of the movies there are complete trash, right? They're just trash. And you kind of have to sort through them in order to find the good ones. You just, find the ones that you're like, yeah, I'm willing to watch that. And in my mind, a witness would say, don't even go into the store.
Right.
Don't even go in there. And I'm like, well, then you're never exercising your freedom of choice. You're never given the opportunity to use discernment, to figure this out for yourself, to bump into challenging situations, to actually do the wicked deed, whatever that might be, and understand what that means to you. And then just decide from there. You have to experience things sometimes. You have to go in and exercise your discernment and your judgment and your ability to make decisions.
Yeah.
And ability to make bad decisions. I'm not trying to be black and white here too, but when you practice making bad decisions, then good decisions become more important to you. It's practice, right? Yeah.
What do you think I know everybody's different, but what do you think is the biggest obstacle for people who are awakening to the reality that slaving for Jehovah may not be filling their life, or it may not? Do you know what I mean? What do you suppose the biggest obstacle is for people to fully awaken and embrace that there's more?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I can speak from myself. Probably one of the biggest obstacles for me was truly trusting my inner knowing. My inner knowing was telling me the truth. It's what I had been indoctrinated with that was telling me that my inner knowing was wrong.
Right. The hardest treacherous.
Yes. And that is so damaging, and it's so confusing. But I feel like that's probably has been one of my main challenges, because I was raised with a very authoritative father who there was a lot of domestic violence in my home. There was a lot of stuff like that going on. And so, I was like, okay, I will listen. I will obey you, because it was fear. I mean, I was afraid if I didn't, then this would happen. Easy to transition into a religion that teaches a God that has a similar temperament, actually.
Right.
And so you're like, okay, I will listen, I will obey, because it means I will die at Armageddon if I do not.
Right.
Or you'll have the rug just pulled right out from underneath you, and you will never have blessings ever in your life, right?
Yeah.
You're doomed for,
yeah.
Yes. So I was 14 when I got baptized, and I was 30 something when I stepped away. That's of having this, of not thinking for myself, not exercising my own ability to know what's right for me. Another tricky thing is that when you have that little niggle inside that says something's not quite right, then there's this little gaslighting that comes in that says, well, if you are not content doing that, then there's something wrong with you. You're spiritually sick. There's that that other like mind fuck that comes in, excuse my language, but it's just like, okay, because then you shut yourself down, and that's so destructive. So I would say if you're a person who is physically ill chronically, that's your cue that you are not listening to yourself. You are not listening to your soul, and that you are actually fighting against yourself. The chronic illness to me is the biggest indicator.
You know what I noticed when I began pioneering is every single pioneer had some kind of chronic injury or ailment of some kind.
Yeah.
Every pioneer. And 3 days before my pioneer status became active, I injured my back.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a coincidence. It's not. When I was living in Africa, I was there for a couple of years, and I had gotten a dysentery, a bacterial dysentery, and I treated it, it was fine, but then there was just something that didn't feel right after that. And so I was living in Mozambique, which was considered third world country, where the medical establishment wasn't really strong to be able to really offer much. So I was able to go down to South Africa, better healthcare options. And so I will never forget this, because this is so interesting. The doctor ran some tests and everything looked fine. And he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Are you happy here? Are you happy doing what you're doing?" And inside I was screaming, "No, I am not." But as the stoic witness that you have to, you put that on, I said, "Well, of course I am." Of course I'm happy. And because if I would have said otherwise, I'd be admitting it. That's how it played in my mind. Like, then I'd be saying that I'm somehow unfaithful to God, to Jehovah, by saying that I'm actually not happy doing this. I mean, that's how far that got into my psyche and into my physicality. Like that I couldn't even listen and admit the honest truth of how I felt.
Yeah.
So I just, it's that tapping in, I think. I guess that where it depends is how long a person has been involved, if they were raised as a witness, and depending on the involvement, and there's a lot of variables, but I think that hearing your soul, hearing your own inner voice and listening to your inner knowing, how does your heart speak to you? How does your soul speak to you? How does, and really tapping into that is probably one of the biggest journeys when you leave.
Yeah, there were 3 questions that caused me to awaken. And one of them was, do you feel love in your life?
Mm.
What does your body need to heal? And what is your soul feeling called to do?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized is that going to meetings and the rote, the constant, feeding the programming into your mind, it's designed to prevent you or to deter you from tapping into your inner knowing, to your heart. And the scripture being brought to your attention all the time saying that the heart is treacherous, so you can't listen to it. You must train your mind. And also the aversion to meditation. You should only meditate on the Bible, meditate on the scriptures. God forbid, literally, that you meditate and tap into your soul and your inner knowing. Because if you do, then you will awaken to the fact that Jehovah is not the true God. And this religion is not your way to happiness. And it leads you right out. But that's why you have to stay going to meetings. That's why they're constantly telling you, do your best. Your best is what Jehovah wants. And, your best is meeting attendance and field service and association with only people who believe the same as you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll monitor your best and we'll let you know if that is your best or not. We'll decide that.
And it's never enough.
No, it isn't. I know. I think another big turning point for me, was also opening up to learn more about the history of the Bible. And I read this book. This was instrumental for me. It was called The Return of the Divine Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
And in it was this explanation of this this God of the Bible, especially of the Old Testament, being this like bloodthirsty warmonger, will be just fine with his people raping and pillaging and killing and in the name of God, and how that has somehow been normalized as masculinity. And when she stated it in that way, it was really interesting to me because like masculinity and femininity have both a, kind of negative polarized and positive polarized side to them. And what we've done as a society, especially through religion, is we've normalized the negative polarized, the distorted version of masculinity, which therefore brings in the distorted version of femininity, and they feed off one another. And then there's the God of the New Testament, like Jesus, right? Completely different persona, taught completely different ways of being, and which reflect more of the positive polarized masculine features, which then brought in more of the positive feminine. However, the positive feminine was completely left out of anything, right? The idea of the feminine voice of God has been completely lost. And so that was so eye-opening to me, because everything in creation is balanced through masculinity and femininity. Everything. And the same has to be for universal source, has to be the epitome of masculine, feminine in its positive polarization, right? It would be a spiritual untruth. It would be for spiritual truth, it has to be that way. So I started tapping into that divine feminine side of things, and like in what's been left out of the Bible, that like Mary Magdalene was actually an instrumental player with Jesus. She was his she was the main apostle. She, you know, their relationship was very intimate. They were partners. There was so much written about her that's been totally destroyed and totally dismissed. But, you know, that's not for everyone, and I understand that. But I feel like one of the biggest healing moments for me was to just kind of come to this realization that Jehovah, and this is a little still hard for me to say out loud for some reason, but I came to the realization that Jehovah is actually similar to Zeus. He's like a character, like Zeus, like I can't think of some of the other mythological characters that carry the same characteristics through time. They're fractals of one another, right? They're fractals. It's not like Jehovah is the universal source. This is a character. This is a mythology similar to a Roman god or a Greek god. It's the same thing. And that was such a huge eye-opener for me to come to that realization too. And I understand, I mean, that takes a lot, but to see it in that way helped me to release the grasp that Jehovah had on me.
Yes.
And then to invite in this, and actually one of my favorite books that really, to me, like epitomized the most beautiful feminine, divine feminine voice of God, of universal source, is the Sophia Code. That book is phenomenal when it comes to just the beauty. When I think about it, still my heart just like swells, because the beauty of the divine feminine voice is so healing, and it's so beautiful, and it's so unlike the God of the Bible. and just, it's beautiful. It's truly, truly beautiful. So it's like, it's all of that we need to gather back in to complete ourselves, but to complete this story of this distorted version of spirituality, of humanity, of sovereignty. Well, sovereignty is nixed in the Bible. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as personal sovereignty, right? There's only one sovereign. But in order for people to claim their sovereignty, they have is offered in the Bible is so incomplete. It's just one tiny, tiny distorted version of truth, of what else is. It's just incomplete, and it's distorted.
I agree with you. And I would add that there are many other books that were not included in the Bible canon. And I believe that the books that were included in the Bible have been revised in order to perpetuate this, masculine only patriarchal trajectory or whatever. And in fact, I know a lot of things intuitively, and, my partner and I read about things and study, and Jesus was a Gnostic, and Gnosticism, they emphasized the feminine. The female Gnostic was equally powerful, if not more, because of our connection to the divine. And there are such books like the Nag Hammadi scriptures that have a lot more information in them. The books of Thomas, which is a joke among witnesses. Where's the book of Thomas? It's in the Bible. Where is it at? It's like there isn't one, but actually, in reality, there is. And some of these books, like the Book of Mary, they say a lot more about who Jesus truly was. He was trained by the Essenes, and he went to India, and he didn't actually die. There was, I wonder if some of his miracles were actually reality shifts. And, he had the ability he was a more developed soul and was able to walk on water, so to speak. And maybe that's a metaphor for having control of his emotions. And I remember being in the Kingdom Hall and doing my personal study and thinking, I read hearts too. Like, I'm an empath. I didn't know what an empath was at the time, but I could feel like I feel other people's feelings. And, I can read hearts as well. And when we would go to the memorial, I feel like I came from heaven. I've been to heaven. I don't feel like I should drink this symbolic blood, but if I'm go one of the, you know what I mean? I felt, I never said that out loud, but when I would look at the stars, I couldn't imagine as a witness being in paradise and still not having direct contact with God. I feel like I already have that, but I'm not one of the 144,000 according to these teachings that I'm agreeing with. But anyhow, the point is, I believe, and this is just an intuitive suggestion, and I don't take my word for it, do your own inner meditation, but I believe that during the time of Charles Taze Russell, there was a growing interest in Gnosticism and the alternative writings that are not included in the Bible canon. And Charles Taze Russell, while he wasn't 100% positive person, he definitely wasn't a negative person, but he had a true desire to know the truth. And so he applied himself to diligent study of the scriptures and had a lot of money and threw all of that money into it. And I think that he was killed. I think that he, like many people in our world today who create a following, who people listen to, they are killed and replaced by someone who is going to follow a different agenda, a negative agenda. And if you look at the footage and the information about Rutherford, he is extremely negative. And that's when this organization became a cult. That's when they named themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. That's when, a lot of people complained about Rutherford because the Bible students had a certain energy about them, and they had a certain motive and a desire. And Rutherford took it in a completely different direction to what we have today. And it's not.
Wasn't he Rutherford who instituted or came up with the disfellowshipping arrangement, I believe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I don't remember exactly the history. I'm just, when I don't remember everything.
I don't either.
I used to be so good about what scripture was what and where, but I don't have that knowledge anymore because it doesn't matter to me as much as following my intuition. And when I study other things, I'm always reminded of things I do remember and feelings I had. I remember how I felt. And I remember studying, I studied my way right out of the religion. I never read the Bible from cover to cover until I began pioneering. And I did read it chronologically forward and then, however, different ways. And every time I got stuck, like you said, on this, you mentioned on the way God is so bloodthirsty, supposedly. But that, as you said, Jehovah is not, he's a being, but he's not the creator of the universe. He's not the Logos.
No.
But he is something, and when you apply to his program and you stick with his program, he takes you somewhere, but it's not where he says he's going to take you. I think that when people die as Jehovah's Witnesses, they go in stasis, and their souls are feeding something. Because as a medium, I can't reach anybody that I loved that passed away. They're not there. And that's how it is when people go to hell, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to describe it. If I, like, for example, my grandmother died and I thought of her and she came right in. I could feel her energy. She obviously did not go to hell, because you can't reach people that are there. You can send love to them. I try to call to people who were Jehovah's Witnesses. This may be a little too far-fetched for some people, but and then there's other, there's different things that take place after you leave your physical body, depending on what your soul experience was. And it's not a positive thing. Jehovah's Witnesses is not positive, and I feel sad for.
I have a thought on that, and maybe so. I've read a little bit too about, what is it called? Psychopump, right? Helping individuals who have passed, they've passed away on this earth plane, but for various reasons, they remain earthbound because, or their spirit remains earthbound because of, like, I've read before, like if a person suddenly passes away, like really unexpectedly, and especially if they didn't have a really clear kind of not knowing about what happens at and after death, there's this confusion. They literally are like, I don't know what happened, and I don't know where I am, and I don't know what's next, kind of thing. I don't know what. Do you think that potentially because that witnesses are taught that at death you just go to the grave, that you literally aren't going anywhere, that they could potentially kind of still be earthbound in a sense, like kind of confused and waiting and wondering, like maybe not necessarily like well, no, that does become negative because I've read that they are very confused. It's like, it's hard because they don't know what to do. And so a person who has the ability to help them launch, there's like certain methods and kind of criteria of how you do that, but there's people out there who do that. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting, and perhaps that might be something interesting to think about or to meditate on too in your work. I don't know.
I'll tell you what I know, my knowing, and
yes,
in this world we want to know, where's my proof, how can I,
yeah.
Well, I don't have that, but I can tell you in my experience. And when the people in Las Vegas passed away, do you remember the Las Vegas shooting?
Yes.
A lot of people felt that way. People who had been killed at that event, I felt them come in and they were confused and like,
yeah,
what's going on? But they, that's not a problem. You can overcome that. As far as Jehovah's Witnesses go, what you said is correct. They're taught to believe, and it's ingrained in them. It's a program. And remember, when you get baptized, you're making a contract with Jehovah. Mm-hmm. You have to answer 3 questions out loud in front of everyone. Yes. And when you do that, you're making an agreement.
Yes.
And if you continue with that agreement, then when you die, this is why I feel like it's important for people to know this, but I don't want to scare anyone, because I had 3 friends who passed who were witnesses that I can think of at the moment, and I can't reach them. And I'm not, because I was just a member of the congregation, but they basically, the impression that I get is they're asleep and they're waiting for Jehovah to wake them up.
Yeah.
And he's not going to, because that doesn't serve him to do that. Your soul, I'm not sure if their soul can continue to reincarnate, but it keeps them as like a slave. And that's actually, we all agree with that. We know that we're slaving for Jehovah.
Yeah.
So we don't know that we continue as a slave, as a soul, after we pass in our bodies. So they're still slaves. But I think that those who love them, like if someone alive today, for example, maybe watching this video, who has a loved one who was a witness who has passed, and they, feel called to pray about their family member. And that's another thing as a witness. You don't pray for people who've passed. You don't pray for people who've been disfellowshipped. You only pray for people who are doing whatever, it's an incantation. You're casting spells when you pray. And if you think about all of that and let that sink into your heart, it all leads to the same thing, which is these souls are being funneled into a very negative place. However, I think that if, as I was going to say, someone has a loved one who their heart feels like they want to call on them, you should pray to that loved one and visualize them being like in a complete stasis, sleep state, like a coma, and your voice can wake them up. What the highest vibration is love.
Absolutely.
And if you have that kind of love for a person, you can reach that soul. and help them to wake up. Or, I don't know the details of what exactly goes on over there because I'm in a fleshly body,
Exactly.
So I don't have
Yep.
all the information, but that's what I do have. And, I think we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So interesting. So that waking up is also multidimensional, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. I feel like if somebody is thinking about it and they want to take steps, it's important to know that they're supported. And so, and it's important to, have people to reach out to. And I've been taking this training to help people to identify their soul language. So what that means is like helping them to connect with their purpose on like, why are they here? Like as their soul, why they came, what purpose did they come here to, what mission, to fulfill? Then what kind of gifts and talents, kind of toolbox they've been kind of given to fulfill that mission. And then there's also their soul personality, their soulful personality, their essence. And why I feel that was helpful is because you're so disconnected from yourself when you've been involved in a religion like that, right? So even knowing how your soul speaks to you can be a real challenge. And I found that although I like different little systems like that because I feel like they just hold clues and pieces of information for you to be able to gather in. I don't ever look at something as absolute, like, like here's another set of rules to live by. That's not what I'm looking for. But I feel like for me, like I had that soul language reading done because I needed a baseline. I'm like, I need to say, okay, I see that this is my soul longing because I haven't tapped into it until right now. Like I've been disconnected, right? So if this can help me get started by saying, okay, like for me, my soul's purpose is to be a mentor, like to guide people. I'm not like a teacher who's going to be with you on a weekly basis necessarily, but like a mentor where I have nuggets of information for you at this moment. You go take that information and turn it into something that is valuable for you. That's not my job. That's your job. Like I can help guide, offer suggestions. I get information, and then I deliver it, right? Then the toolbox I have, this is the one that I had the hardest time connecting to, but I feel it, is a troubadour, which is, this medieval lyrical poet, right? So using my words gracefully and poetically and delivering whatever information I give in a way that people can digest and truly feel and embrace and have some lightness to it, like lightness and gentleness and joy potentially, right? As I'm moving my hands, this is my troubadour. I can feel that, and then my tone, like my spiritual or soulful personality is a soothsayer. So this very still, very connected, very like, tapping into this divine information and actually being quite quiet and thoughtful about it, but it's the troubadour that then brings it up into form, right? So like for me to sit with myself, and I have a lot going on here. I've got so much going on here that I need to ground on a regular basis too. I need to ground all that out into nature. And so I feel like to have that as like a baseline or a goalpost or something to look toward, because where I am now and where I know my potential lies, there's a space in between. Like I'm not quite there yet. And oftentimes what's in between is unresolved trauma. It's unresolved emotions. It's, so many layers that we really need to dismantle so that we can get closer to the soul alignment, right? That all of those things affect the alignment, our alignment with our souls. So anyway, I'm learning kind of a system, or, just kind of going through a training on offering that to people. And I feel like that is potentially really helpful for individuals who are walking away, but after they've gone through some of their grieving, after they've gone through some of their healing around leaving, and when they're ready to go, all right, I am ready to find out more about me now, more about who I am without all of this input, from all this noise from people and involvement and all of that. So if people can really, the faster I feel they can move through the releasing and the healing and the letting go and into their listening and tapping into their own unique voice and soul, and the easier the transition will be. Yeah. Took me a long time.
Have you found a new network? I mean, you said you had to build a new community, and do you feel like you've done that?
Not fully, because I still feel these I'm kind of a loner person anyway, right? I have a few very intimate people in my life. But I do miss community. And it was interesting because in my university experience, it wasn't until after I was done that I realized that I was also trying to find community there by following all of their rules and doing what they wanted me to do and thinking like they wanted me to think. And then I graduated and my appendix ruptured a week later. Oh. And I'm like, so there was this going deep again, and realizing what I just did all over again. and letting go of all of those authoritative figures in my life, and figuring that they know better than I do, therefore I will do what they say. And I just, sometimes I'm like, Melissa, come on. When are you going to learn? And then I worked at the university, and then my job ended abruptly last year, a year ago, actually, almost to the date. And that was my answer. It's it is time. It is time for you to step into your authenticity. You have to find out who you are. You have a gift for this world. So do we all. We all have a gift for this world. And we, now is the time to tap into it. The momentum is just, it has built. I won't even say is building. It's built. The momentum is there. It is now time. It is time to make that choice and move. Yeah.
Well, in that sense, this pandemic has been a gift, because I don't know what it's like in the kingdom halls right now, but not having the ability to go to meetings and be regularly programmed, and not being able to go door to door and associate in that way has created a major opportunity for people to walk away. And if there are any people who could be whistleblowers, and gently share with others, even anonymously, what they really know is going on, or what the organization is about, now is the time to reach out.
Absolutely.
And, even anonymously, if you don't want to lose the people that you love. And but I think that we should talk about this again. We should formulate more thoughts about this if we want to co-create more content with me, I would love to do that, because
Yes.
I don't want to talk about Jehovah's Witnesses in a disparaging way. There's a lot of content creators who are angry and are not spiritual. You know, many people who leave Jehovah's Witnesses just completely abandon God altogether. But there's a whole concept of what God really is, and that requires going within and doing the inner work and working on your emotions and your feelings and learning about the true nature of spirituality, that there's so much in the gray area that isn't talked about, and that's going to be coming. I think it's like you said, it's time, and it's time for it to come out. And I would love to have more conversations with you about that topic.
I would love that. And this is where that, because I know how tenderly connected I was. And I know that others have that same thing. I get the anger. I never felt really angry. I just felt like I felt betrayed. I felt, I felt like this, like mourning and this loss, this deep loss. And so those were my feelings. And of course, I'm angry that that organization has become something that is not what I signed up for, right? And that's in those senses. But it's also not a surprise. It just isn't. It's just the nature of any type of organization that has large numbers of people and large amounts of money flowing through it. It's just it's inevitable. They're connected to things that just bring it all down. But nevertheless, there's those types of feelings of anger. But when it becomes an intimate thing of like how you personally feel and how you were connected, and having that honest, like, look at the emotions that you feel, especially the tender ones, because the tender ones we want to push away because they're tender, because they hurt. And it's those, that's where I can see where I fit in here is helping, assist or just being there for people who are feeling that tender hurt.
It's anger has its place, and it's very healthy. And that's sometimes
absolutely
the fuel that one needs to remove themselves from negative situations. But we have to get beyond the anger, integrate it, and move into the healing process, which I think that's a lot of fun, actually.
It is. And that's where I'm like, okay, I need more of that lighter, that joy, that, it's not all about, light and joy but it is much more fun. It's like, okay, we're open to all of this potential, like woohoo. It's like a kid in a candy store, we've got so much in front of us.
Well, it was really wonderful speaking with you today.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much for putting this together and for your patience as I got better. And I look forward to future conversations.
Me too. And definitely send me your links to how people can contact you if anyone wants to reach out and speak with you.
Okay.
I
will do that. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You take care. Bye.
You too. Bye. Thank you for listening to this conversation. We sincerely hope you find something of value in it. To be notified of our future content, please do subscribe and share this information. Namaste.